The best sales systems in the world don't persuade, they indoctrinate. Netflix doesn't convince people to binge. Nike doesn't argue with why they're better. Apple doesn't persuade people to upgrade, yet somehow millions decide on their own. And yet, most founders are stuck on doing the opposite long calls, explaining value, fighting for every yes. And the difference isn't effort or skill, it's belief. The kind that once installed in your buyer's mind is impossible to ignore. They become obsessed and commit before you ever say a word. The problem is, most businesses treat sales like a set of tactics, not a system that shapes beliefs. They push, persuade, and explain because they haven't installed the one thing that makes buyers sell themselves. I call it the Belief Indoctrination System, the hidden architecture behind the best sales systems in the world that get leads to sell themselves. Now, it's how you get your innovation asset and moving it from something you know to something the buyer believes so deeply that choosing you feels inevitable. And today, we're breaking it down. Welcome back. I'm Echeverria, and I help founders and CEOs become category leaders by turning their expertise into a self-selling IP system using the Netflix effect. Now, this week, we're continuing on our Innovation Assets in Action series, where I'm going to show you how to deploy your innovation assets within your business systems. Now, last episode was on category leadership content, how you actually deploy that innovation asset through content that actually leads conversations instead of joining them. Now, in this episode, we're going to deploy it inside of your sales system, except we're not optimizing for sales. We're eliminating the need for it entirely. Because here's what I see over and over again. Founders who do the work to build innovation assets, those proprietary methods that actually make them different, but then they bury them under traditional sales tactics. Discovery calls to understand the problem, case studies to prove the approach works, objection handling to overcome their resistance, closing techniques to get them to a yes. All designed to convince buyers that your solution is better. Why? Because the strategy was built for commoditized services, businesses who don't have an innovation asset. And when you actually have one, those tactics don't help you, they work against you. They end up hiding what makes you different under persuasion frameworks. Your innovation asset shouldn't be explained on sales calls. It should be doing the selling for you so that when people show up, they're already convinced. So what does that actually look like? How do you get people to sell themselves instead of you selling them? Now, it starts with understanding that most sales systems are built backwards. They focus on persuasion, where your entire goal is to convince buyers that your solution is better. But people don't buy when they're convinced. They buy when they've convinced themselves. That's why the companies that get pre-sold buyers aren't persuading. They indoctrinate. They install beliefs that turn prospects into believers before a sales conversation ever starts. Let me show you how. In the early 2000s, every gym was selling the same thing: memberships, equipment access, classes, maybe some personal training packages in between. The pitch was all about convenience and features. We're open 24 hours. We have the newest machines. We have tons of class options, or we're only $29 a month. And people would shop around. They'd compare amenities and negotiate on price. And if they ended up signing up, they'd show up for 2 weeks and then ghost. The entire industry was built on high churn because nobody actually cared about being there. Now, Greg Glassman saw what was happening. Everyone was treating fitness like a chore, something you did to maintain your body or a box to check. And he decided that that entire framing was broken. So he didn't try to sell gym memberships. He installed a completely different belief about what fitness actually is. His belief was that fitness isn't maintenance, it's a sport. And if you're not competing, even just against yourself, you're not actually training. Now, CrossFit built everything around reinforcing that belief. Workouts weren't routines, they were named like opponents that you had to beat. You didn't track progress privately, you wrote your score on a whiteboard where everyone could see. And the language was different: WODs, PRs, RX. You either knew it or you didn't belong yet. They weren't teaching people to exercise, they were converting them to a belief system. You're either in or you're out. Casual doesn't exist here. And fitness is a competitive sport, not something you do on a treadmill while watching Netflix. So people didn't just join CrossFit gyms because they were comparing prices or class schedules. They joined because they'd been converted. They adopted the language. They started identifying as CrossFitters, defended it to friends who thought it was crazy. They became evangelists. And Elon Musk did the same thing. He looked at the auto industry and saw something nobody else was willing to admit, that the entire system was designed to keep buying the same thing over and over. Gas cars weren't the default because they were better. They were the default because that's what the infrastructure supported. Dealerships existed to create information asymmetry, so you'd overpay. So he didn't end up trying to compete with Toyota or BMW on features. He installed a belief that made that entire industry look obsolete. The belief? Gas isn't just outdated, it's over. And if you're buying into that system, you're on the wrong side of history. So every product reveal reinforced this. Every comparison made gas cars look like relics. And every interaction with Tesla eliminated the dealership BS that everyone had accepted as normal. People didn't show up to Tesla showrooms ready to compare options. They showed up already decided. They'd put down $1,000 deposits for cars they would receive in years. They never test drove one, never haggled the price. They became evangelists before they became owners. They got into arguments defending Tesla to friends who didn't get it yet. They explained why anyone still buying gas was making a mistake. The sale happened long before they ever configured their vehicle. They'd already been converted. Tesla didn't win by having better sales tactics. They won by installing a belief system. They indoctrinated, then people sold themselves. See the pattern? CrossFit indoctrinated people into believing that fitness is sport, making CrossFit inevitable for believers. And Tesla indoctrinated people into believing gas is obsolete, making Tesla inevitable for believers. Neither tried to convince in sales conversations. They converted belief systems before the conversation happened. The indoctrination happened first, and then they sold second. Because let's be honest, you want that. You want clients who show up already sold, who've binged your content, adopted your way of thinking, decided your solution is what they need. People who ask, when can we get started, instead of how does this work? Sophisticated buyers with real budgets and real urgency who aren't just shopping around, they're ready to commit. And you've been doing what you were told to do to achieve that. Refining your pitch, learning objection handling frameworks, hiring and training top salespeople, but you're still getting people who need convincing, who compare you to competitors, who say they need to think about it, who ask for discounts or payment plans. You're doing everything right. So the question is, why isn't it bringing in the buyers you want? Because everything you were taught about sales was built on one fundamental belief flaw: that buyers need to be sold, that they are undecided when they get on a call with you, that it's your job to use the right questions, the right proof, the right rebuttals to move them from maybe to yes, and that buying is something you make happen through tactics. So discovery calls exist because you believe that you need to uncover their pain so you can position your solution. Case studies exist because you believe that you need to prove it works before they'll trust you. And objection handling exists because you believe resistance is natural and needs to be overcome. And closing techniques exist because you believe the decision won't happen unless you push for it. Every single one of these tactics assume the same thing: the buyer can't or won't decide without you convincing them. And that assumption is what's sabotaging you, because that belief doesn't just shape how you sell, it shapes how your entire order of the decision, and thus how the system is designed. Because when you believe that buyers need to be sold, you design systems to sell to people, where the decision is supposed to happen during a sales conversation. And your belief comes last. The call is where everything is supposed to click. And that reverses the natural order of decision making. Because once you reverse the order, everything downstream breaks. First, you attract buyers who need convincing. When belief isn't installed up front, the people who enter your world aren't committed. They're curious, comparing, shopping. You're not attracting buyers who already believe. You attract buyers who are waiting to be convinced. Second, it trains people to delay decisions. See, when your system assumes that the decision happens on a call, you're teaching buyers to wait for the call to decide, to think it over, to explore alternatives, to come in with questions instead of conviction. That hesitation isn't resistance. It's learned behavior, and you designed for it. Third, you position yourself as the persuader, not the inevitable choice. See, authority doesn't overcome objections or negotiate worth. It sets the standard and lets others self-select. The second you step into persuasion, you turn yourself into an option, because persuasion only exists when belief is missing. So the sabotage isn't psychological, it's structural. You didn't build a sales system, you built a hesitation filter. And the more you're optimizing your tactics inside this backward system, the harder you have to work for every yes. See, sales tactics don't create conviction. They compensate for the absence of belief. Think about choosing a college. When you visit a school and they're trying to convince you, they're walking you through rankings, stats, or campus perks, you're not sold yet. But when you walk out on a campus and you just know, you've already been indoctrinated. You heard alumni talk about it, you absorbed the culture, you adopted the belief that this is where I belong. The admissions conversation becomes a formality. You're not being convinced, you're confirming a decision you already made. That is indoctrination. The belief came first and it made the decision inevitable. That's the difference. Persuasion tries to move the undecided, indoctrination makes the decision inevitable. So, what happens when belief comes first instead of last? What does a sales system look like when buyers show up already decided? That's where indoctrination comes in. I call it the belief indoctrination system. It's the hidden architecture behind sales systems that get buyers to sell themselves. Now, once you understand this, you'll never look at sales systems the same way ever again. So let me show you how you turn your innovation asset into a belief indoctrination system so that you actually create belief first and decisions become inevitable. Now, there are three key pieces, starting with what I call category defining theory. This is the categorical logic shift that sets the stage for everything else. The second is the indoctrination ladder. This is how you sequence belief installation. And the third is the bingeable experience, how you structure it so people convert in 48 hours instead of 6 months. Now, each component builds on the last, and together they turn prospects into believers before they ever talk to you. So let's start with component number one, category defining theory. Now, your category defining theory is a single line idea that challenges and redefines how people think about the entire problem. This is not your tagline or a mission statement. It's the belief that makes it impossible for buyers to categorize you with anyone else. Think about it this way. When people discover your business or solution, their brain immediately tries to categorize it. Things with like, oh, they're a SaaS tool, or oh, they're a consulting firm, or oh, that's a legal consultant. And when that happens, you're now competing for space in their brain. They're comparing you to everyone else in that category. So everything you say from there on out gets filtered through what they already believe about people in that space. Now, this is an invisible problem that most founders never see because you've been categorized and you're no longer being evaluated for your thinking. You're being evaluated based on familiar criteria, things like price, features, experience, proof, credentials, not because those things matter more, but because categorization determines what the brain looks for. So this is why even the most innovative founders still end up getting compared, not because their work isn't different, but because the belief that frames the difference was never actually installed. So here's what this looks like in practice. A founder builds a proprietary system for scaling teams without adding headcount. It uses automation and AI to do what normally requires hiring 10 more reps. But when they go pitch it to buyers, they lead with this idea that they're a sales enablement platform. Now, the buyer's brain immediately categorizes sales tools like HubSpot, Outreach, Salesloft. Now, every conversation becomes, what's your email deliverability rate? How does your pricing compare to Outreach? Do you integrate with Salesforce? Now, the founder is stuck in feature comparisons and pricing negotiations, even though what they built eliminates the need for headcount expansion entirely. Why? Because they never challenged the belief that scaling sales requires hiring more people. They jump straight to pitching their platform without installing the foundational belief that made their solution revolutionary. So your category defining theory is the belief that's going to reorder how the problem is understood. It doesn't explain your solution. It changes the lens your buyers use to evaluate all solutions. Now, once installed, it changes how they think about everything. It's no longer which one is the right solution. They're saying, why is this not the standard? You become the reference point. So this is why category defining theories always sound slightly uncomfortable at first. They don't fit cleanly into what people already know. They challenge an assumption that the market has been operating on. So CrossFit didn't say we're a better gym. They redefined fitness as a sport, and that pissed people off. Tesla didn't say we make electric cars. They redefined gas as obsolete. Now, once that belief lands, the decision isn't about preference, it's about alignment. So either you see the world this way or you don't. And that's the point, because indoctrination doesn't try to appeal to everyone. It creates a belief-based filter. The people who adopt the belief move closer. The people who don't self-select out. That's how belief gets installed before persuasion ever begins. So, how do you actually build this? Your category defining theory has two parts. Part number one, challenge the existing logic so you can show what they currently believe is broken or incomplete. Part number two, redefine what the solution actually is. This is giving them the framework that replaces the old logic with a new paradigm. So, an example with this episode is that it's not about selling your buyers, it's about getting your buyers to sell themselves. Part one challenges the belief that you need to convince people to buy. Part two redefines the solution as indoctrination that makes them sell themselves. One sentence dismantles the old paradigm and installs a new one. Now, here's what your category defining theory needs to do it needs to be able to create an irreversible shift. So, if it doesn't make them question what they've been doing, it's not strong enough. If they can fit your idea into their existing approach without abandoning anything, you haven't challenged the belief hard enough. So the goal isn't just to be controversial, it's to be accurate about what's actually broken. When it lands, they can't unsee it. And everything that comes after builds upon that foundation. Once your category defining theory installs that foundational belief, you need to build on it step by step. Now, that's where component two comes in, the indoctrination ladder. Belief isn't something that you just state, it's something that you build for. It's the same way that we make decisions, right? We create a sequence. One belief creates the next belief, and so on and so forth. And when those beliefs are installed in the right order, the decision stops feeling like a choice and it starts feeling like the only logical conclusion. This is where most founders end up breaking the system. They introduce a powerful idea, then they immediately jump ahead. They explain too much, add tactics too soon, or they stack ideas that haven't been earned yet. So instead of compounding belief, they end up fracturing it because you can't ask someone to accept your conclusion before they've adopted the premise that makes it true. Now, think about it like building a house. You can't frame the walls before you pour the foundation, and you can't add the roof before the walls are up. Each step requires the one before it, and belief works the same way. Now, instead of leading the buyer through a sequence, most sales systems throw disconnected ideas at them. Each one may be smart on its own and correct, but they're not stacking. So when beliefs don't stack, the buyer doesn't arrive at the conclusion. We're asking them to accept it, which means that it puts you right back into persuasion. Now, indoctrination works differently. It mirrors how decisions are actually made. Each belief is installed only after the previous one has done its job. Each idea is proving that the last one is true. So those pieces make the worldview harder to escape. This is why I created what is called mirror decision making inside of a belief ladder, because everyone else goes about decision making and beliefs differently. But I created a belief ladder that allows you to not just repeat the same belief, you're climbing it. Every piece of content, every example, every story, every distinction you're drawing are actually creating that belief. Now, there are 5 levels to this ladder, from breaking their current thinking all the way to making your solution inevitable. And each one only works when the other one before it has landed. And it reinforces that same category defining theory, but from a higher rung each time. It's built again around mirroring decision making, and it's a proprietary method we've developed. So the belief doesn't just feel stated, it starts to feel proven. And over time, something really incredible happens. The belief stops sounding like your opinion and it starts feeling like reality. This is why category leaders feel like obvious in hindsight. It's not because their ideas were simple, it was because their thinking was coherent. There was no mixed signals, no competing frames, no borrowed language from the category they're disrupting. Everything compounds towards that same conclusion. That's how belief becomes internalized. Because when buyers can predict what you're going to say because it's consistent with how they think now, then the decision is already being made. They stop asking, is this true? And they start saying, of course, this is how it always has worked. That's the moment that belief moves from exposure to ownership. And when someone owns the belief, you don't have to persuade them. They defend it, they explain it to others, they filter their decisions through it. And you know your indoctrination ladder is working when people start using your language inside of their comments and their questions, inside of how they speak. They explain concepts to others without you needing to prompt them. They use your conceptual language as their own, and they defend your position when someone challenges it. So when that happens, indoctrination is complete, and the sales conversation becomes enrollment instead of convincing, which means your sales system no longer has to create conviction, it only has to reveal it. Now, once you've built your indoctrination ladder, you need to deploy it in a way that converts people in days instead of months. That is where component 3 comes in and what I call the bingeable experience. Now, most founders have been told that indoctrination takes time. Months of nurturing, email sequences, long-term relationship building, this idea of slow trust development. But that's not how indoctrination actually works. Indoctrination works through immersion. Think about Netflix. You don't watch one episode, wait a week, watch another episode, wait another week. You binge. You watch 3, 4, 5 episodes in a row. And by the end of the session, you're not just interested in the show, you're emotionally invested. The characters start to feel real. The storyline feels urgent. You care about what happens next. That's not because you spent months with it. It's because you spent hours immersed in it. Now, belief installation works the same way. The bingeable experience is how you structure your content so that people consume your entire belief system in one sitting instead of drip feeding it over months. Now, this is extremely important in a time where cognitive load is so high. Right now, when someone discovers you and consumes a piece of content, then leaves and come back a week later for another piece, they're starting over each time. Their brain has moved on. They've seen other content, they've heard other perspectives, and your belief installation gets diluted by everything else that's competing for their attention. But when they binge your content and go from one piece to the next in the same session, each belief is compounding on the last. There's no gap for doubt to creep in. There's no time for competing viewpoints to dilute your message. And by the time they finish, they're not just aware of your thinking, they've adopted it. So how do you build this? Your content needs to be structured for sequential consumption, creating this natural loop from the belief you completed to the next belief you're creating. It creates this episodic indoctrination, and it's exactly why our bingeable decision system works so well. It's designed to be binged. And when you do this, people don't just learn from you over time, they convert in 48 hours. They go from this is interesting to this is the only way that makes sense, all inside of a single session. Now you collapse sales cycles that took months into hours. You turn cold leads into brand evangelists. And when they reach out, they're not asking questions. They're not comparing options. They're asking, when can they start? So when you change the entire belief around selling being necessary to selling being optional, because indoctrination happened before the sales conversation ever began. So here's how you know that you've created a bingeable experience that's working. People start to tell you that they went down the rabbit hole with your content. They consumed multiple pieces in one sitting, and then they arrived at your solution already decided. When that happens, you've built an indoctrination system that is doing the selling for you. And that's when things change. You've officially turned your innovation assets into a self-selling system. And it's when my clients come to me and start saying, I stopped selling. My method started doing the work for me. People stopped asking about my prices and started saying, sign me up. The sales calls become formalities because people already decide before ever speaking to you. That's what happens when you stop selling and start indoctrinating. Your innovation asset does the converting and your content does the selling. So you show up to sales calls with people who have already sold themselves. So let's bring this back. Traditional sales is fundamentally broken because it's built on one flawed assumption that buyers need to be sold. But buyers don't need to be sold. They need to be indoctrinated so that by the time someone gets on a sales call, the real decision has already been made. That is how Tesla, CrossFit, and Basecamp are able to not persuade, but instead indoctrinate. They install beliefs that make their solution inevitable for anyone that ever talks to them. And you can do the same thing with a belief indoctrination system. Again, you need a category defining theory, that single line belief that makes it impossible for buyers to categorize you with anyone else. Then you need an indoctrination ladder, the belief sequence that actually makes each piece step by step, creating it so they actually develop that belief on their own. And lastly, having a bingeable experience, that structure that lets people consume your entire belief system in 48 hours instead of 6 months. When you build this, your sales calls become enrollment conversations and people end up selling themselves. They show up repeating your frameworks. They use your language. They're already decided. And that's not luck. That is the system that we've developed. We have studied innovation, understood the theory behind how we mirror decisions, and created something truly proprietary that changes everything behind what you do. Because indoctrinating buyers is only one step. What you need next is to turn your innovation asset into the operating system that runs your entire business. And that's exactly what we've built inside the EasyS method. Now, the first step is to build your innovation asset because your best clients aren't looking for a slightly better version of what everyone else does. They're looking for this breakthrough that makes them say, this is exactly what I've been waiting for. This is where we build your innovation asset together, that proprietary methodology, theory, and everything that actually makes you the only solution, not just another option. And it's where most founders end up missing it because innovation assets aren't just marketing tools. They're the entire operating system behind your business. They dictate your offers, your operations, your team structure, your revenue stream. They turn founder-dependent genius into a scalable business asset that works without you. When you have this, you stop competing entirely. Your clients recognize your value instantly and they invest without hesitation. So your competition becomes irrelevant. Now, the second step is to deploy it through your indoctrination system. This is exactly what we talked about here today because your indoctrination ladder, your category defining theory, that bingeable experience is how you bring that innovation asset to life so that it creates a self-selling system. Now buyers can binge your content, adopt your beliefs, and actually come to the call ready to buy, which leads us to the third and final step of systemizing delivery with a happy client machine. Because founders understand that marketing and sales are just not enough. You need to deliver results that turn your clients into raving fans who refer you without asking and buy without any hesitation. That's where the happy client machine comes in. It systemizes your delivery so your innovation asset runs the client experience, not you. This is where you can create multiple revenue streams. Your innovation asset is becoming the foundation for courses, certifications, programs, done for you services, licensing deals, all running on the same system. So you're not trading time for money anymore. You're scaling an operating system. That is the easiest method. And it's exactly what we build together with our clients. So if you're ready to turn your expertise into an innovation asset that operates your business and makes buyers sell themselves, I want to invite you to book a growth optimization call. On this call, we'll map out where your innovation opportunities are, how to structure that innovation asset into an indoctrination system, and how to actually deploy it as your operating system within your entire business. So if you're ready to book that call, head on over to easyesleads.com/call. Now, if you're new here or you want to just learn a little bit more about how we develop the Netflix effect to turn expertise into a self-selling system, you can go binge the on-demand series right now by heading on over to thenetflixeffect.com. Now, lastly, I hope that you've enjoyed this episode, that it made you think differently. If it has, I would love and appreciate if you could take 1 second to rate, subscribe, and share this with a friend. But until next time, here's to keeping it real.